I don't know about you, but World of Warcraft just doesn't feel like the same game that it was back in the day, and that is sort of natural, but also not really. This is, of course, not a negativity video to just pile on Blizzard, as they're definitely obviously trying quite hard with Dragonflight, the new expansion, and despite all the new features, the more frequent patches, it just feels like that magic aspect is no longer there. I don't really know how to explain it. Is it the factor that the game has just used all there is to it? After all, the 20th anniversary is coming soon. Is it that we had also just gotten older over time, or has the Warcraft team just actually changed? Like, have we gotten from the Orcs versus humans brutal war to a team that no longer really resonates with the audience? Pandaria, for example, was just like Dragonflight, brand new continent, brand new lore, brand new characters, but I feel like they had done such a better job of keeping it Warcraft with the storytelling, something I feel like is kinda missing with Dragonflight. So what are all the factors, and could we be expecting 11.0 to be the expansion that is going to bring WoW back to the glory days? If you guys want to buy Total War, Elder Scrolls, or any other game, you can get them at great prices with my Gamivo link. You can also get anything Warcraft related, gift cards and software, and all below market prices. Best of all, if you add my code DORON, you can get an even bigger discount, so make sure to check out my link in the description and get some amazing deals with Gamivo. To start off, I just want to say, as a content creator that has been making videos since Myths of Pandaria on YouTube, so for a really long time, we had right now in Dragonflight gotten up to a point where we data mine the actual ending of the expansion, like the finale of the major patch, the culmination of all this build up for the past year and a half, possibly the ending of Whole of Dragonflight, and people just don't really even care to know all that much about it. I mean, when we compare this with Legion, for example, this would be like breaking news, but I feel like this expansion in particular has just gotten a lot of people up to the point where they just don't really care, or they sort of mildly care, but they're not particularly invested. There isn't a lot of negativity in Dragonflight because overall it is a pretty good expansion. With Shadowlands there was a lot of bad stuff, so the negativity was even what drew certain people in, as they couldn't believe how ridiculous things have gotten. But I feel like at this point we're experiencing like the real damage that Shadowlands did on World of Warcraft lore. I'm not, of course, just talking about YouTube here. You have definitely noticed the popularity of WoW is at least 50% less than back in BFA, if not more, so you can see this on Twitch, you can see this on forum activity, and just everywhere Warcraft related. For us that have been really into the lore, I feel like a lot of you can relate with me here, but I feel like I'm just not as excited about the story as I was in the past. There is definitely the factor that a lot of story has sort of been ruined, but I feel like WoW lore has just changed overall. It just isn't as gripping as it was in the past. There are, of course, still some interesting aspects, some interesting things we learn, but I just don't feel like where I would get lost for like 2 hours in the wiki pages like I would back in the days. Before we get into the discussion about Dragonflight, I just want to say that I also think there is a personal factor here as well, and that is definitely for a lot of you too as well. Most WoW players are older now. Most of us started playing this game as kids or teenagers, and you just kind of experience things a lot differently at that point in life. The world itself has also changed quite drastically. Back in the day before social networks, WoW was like the social network, like this virtual world where you can have your own reality. It was sort of unheard of, but now that concept is kind of everywhere. It is like nothing novel. It is like the norm in today's world. This isn't just a problem with World of Warcraft, but the entire MMORPG genre in general. A big part is also we had gotten older, we have less free time, the grind just doesn't feel as fulfilling anymore as it did back in the day. However, while this is a factor, I really don't think this is all there actually is to it. I mean, sure, WoW is 20 years old, almost. Blizzard just admitted they have used up all their Warcraft 3 materials, so naturally it has to evolve, new things have to be invented, but I still think changes can be done and the ship can kind of be turned around. Let's be real, WoW was in a pretty bad shape, in a pretty bad state in Worlds of Draenor, and then Blizzard pulled an explosion with Legion. Literally, they just revived the game to a significant extent. This popularity extended into BFA and was killed by Shadowlands, and now it definitely was not revived by Dragonflight. It was slightly rekindled, but not really to a great extent. Now, don't get me wrong, Dragonflight, by most features, is actually a pretty good expansion overall. It's definitely not Shadowlands, but I feel like it's really lacking on the story aspect in particular. Blizzard is definitely pushing patches like crazy, more so than ever before. We're getting content left and right, a lot of these really cool features all the time. Although I gotta say, at times I feel like they might have pulled down on us, that all of this is a bit of an illusion. If 10.2 is really the final patch, we are getting a 2-patch major expansion that is more expensive than all the others. The spreading into mini patches is like essentially the same amount of content, just spread out to appear more frequent, but of course we'll have to wait and see how much content we actually end up getting in the end. However, the biggest problem with Dragonflight, in my opinion, is this overcorrection. We went from this crazy cosmological storyline with this jailer guy to the Isles, where everything is a little bit too idyllic. We are solving problems we never even knew we had. The entire story is essentially just one big massive build-up for 11.0. Nothing really important is really happening. Dragon Isles are, in my opinion, not really the Dragon Isles that I personally expected. If you remember the original concept, it was this old god place. Dragons are supposed to be these massive scary creatures. Honestly, I would have imagined this as a pretty scary place. However, here dragons are constantly in their human form. They're more human than dragons. They're constantly having these emotional moments. Compare this, for example, with the Isle of Thunder that honestly felt like a pretty dark, pretty scary place. Honestly, I imagine something like either this or like the Dinosaur Islands with the Zandalari back in the day. I also feel like we're focusing way too much on these emotional storyline scenes, Alexstrasza lamenting about her past, dragons reuniting, Dractyl solving the problems not many people care about. Don't get me wrong, these are all cool storylines, but I really feel like that should be on the back burner. It shouldn't really be the main stuff. The main storyline is literally just constant build-up for the next expansion. The Ridicron stuff is mildly interesting, but the real juicy stuff are the Old Gods, the Void, Zealotat, and these plans, and it doesn't really feel like this is even a Dragonflight thing. It just feels like this is being set up for the next expansion. A big problem is also that Blizzard has retconned a lot of stuff, so people have kind of lost their trust in with Blizzard, so they're not really taking the lore as serious as they did in the past. Now, you may be saying like Blizzard already exhausted all their material and now they have to build new things, but honestly, I feel like this execution could be done a little bit better. Remember Mists of Pandaria? I mean, sure, it was hated back in the day, but overall it was a pretty great expansion. It also had a ton of new lore. You could say the same thing about Warcraft 3 lore being exhausted at this point as well. Sure, Pandaren were like a thing in Warcraft 3, but they were literally just one character drinking beer from a keg. It wasn't exactly like enough lore to build an entire continent. However, they could still build an entire new race, completely new mantis that felt like a threat, Yashara, Gelation, a great character that was tied in with the Zandalari and some of the older lore. A lot of this new stuff was brand new storyline, but in my opinion, it just kind of had this magic to it that is sort of missing with the Dragon Isles. I definitely feel like Warcraft storytelling has sort of dulled itself. Originally, Warcraft had this metal theme that was really brutal or about war and destruction, and now it has kind of lost that aspect, which I really feel like is what built the series to the popularity that it had gotten to. You can compare this with certain characters returning. I mean, for example, the Tuskarr are classic. They had gotten a new story in the Dragon Isles, but to me, they kind of just don't feel like the Warcraft 3 Tuskarr or the Wrath of the Lich King Tuskarr. There's just something a little bit different about them. I just can't quite put my finger on it, but they just don't feel like the Tuskarr from the past. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm not just making this video to complain how Dragonflight sucks. I'm not even saying that. I don't think Dragonflight sucks. I actually still feel like this ship for the lore can be turned around. I gotta say, I'm excited about the new Zealotat, Old God, Void teams that could be a potential thing with 11.0. Honestly, with essentially 3 expansions worth of build-up, this one could finally be it, and it should really be it. I don't feel like people are gonna have more patience. Blizzard has also started listening to feedback more. They started pushing more content. They also got Chris Matz back that has literally built Warcraft and this original field that I have been talking about. So I feel like they could actually turn it around with this one. With Shadowlands, I wasn't as optimistic. There wasn't really any indication of change, but here there is obviously a pattern. Things have changed at Blizzard. We learned with Legion that the big revival is possible. Of course, I'm not deluding myself that WoW is going to go back to 12 million players like back in the day, but if they pick the right team, the right storytelling, make the story as gripping as before, it is definitely possible that they could spark a lot of the interest back into this game. Personally, I've talked to a lot of people that wanted to get into WoW that stopped playing a few years back, and they just weren't really drawn in that much by this entire Dragon Isles, this dragon team. At the moment, the leaks are showing potential, things are being set up right. I just hope that Blizzard can push itself on not just making new features, but also getting WoW lore back to what it was and just recreating that magic feel. Thank you for watching. Check out this frog mind control by Yogg-Saron by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on Slavic pirates and Vikings by also clicking on the screen. See you next time.